Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Booth. I am a software engineer at Umbra. Previously, I was the director of engineering over at Radiant Earth, where I was working on Source Cooperative for about the last 2 years. And yeah, I'm just going to give you guys an update on the current state of Source Cooperative as of right now. So in the last month, we pushed out a bunch of new features. So of those features, we have self-service organization management. So now you can create organizations, manage memberships and roles, invite people to them. We've also listened to community on the issues related to access credentials. So one of the biggest issues that we had was access credentials were limited to 8 hours. And every single time you had to go through and regenerate credentials and put them back into your environment variables. And they were also specific for a specific repository. We have since re-architected our entire system so that now we have long-lived access credentials. You can create them yourself. They they operate across repositories, and then you can also specify an expiration time as well. We have also opened our API as well as included documentation for that. We have also started the process of just documenting Source Cooperative in general. There's a little bit on the data.source.coop wiki. There's a little bit in the READMEs, but there's still definitely work that needs to be done there. We have also created the S3 compatible data proxy. That is the primary way that data is now accessed throughout Source Cooperative. And we also now support bring your own bucket. So to get started with that, you just reach out to a source admin and they can get you sorted on that. So I'll give you kind of an overview of how this data proxy kind of works now. So when you hit data.source.coop, that's actually accessing our data proxy. What our data proxy does is it authenticates your request, it authorizes your request, it then translates your request to either S3 or Azure, depending on where the data is actually stored, and then it routes your request to that and then forwards the response back to you. So here we can see an example of accessing two different repositories using just the AWS CLI. So this is behind the scenes, it's using S3 commands to actually access our different buckets. So on the left here, we have a bucket that is hosted on S3. On the right is one on Azure, and you can see using the same CLI tool, which is made for AWS S3. It actually works with both repositories, even though one's on Azure and one's on S3. So here's just an overview of the access credentials. So you can go and create an API key within your profile. Again, as I mentioned, API keys work across repositories, and then users can also specify their expiration time whenever they create one. If you want to create a really long-lived one, just set the expiration time to something like year 3000. I don't think any of us will be alive to, see the end of that. As I mentioned, we also have API documentation now as well. That's hosted on api.docs.source.coop. So with this API, you can now basically do any operation that you can do within the Source Cooperative UI, but you can now do it programmatically. And your API key for that is the same API key that you would generate within your profile as well. Source Cooperative is now also open source. So we have open source the two large components of that, the Source Cooperative web viewer and the data proxy. Those are located on our GitHub, github.com/source-cooperative. It is open source, but we still need help. So with that, we need feature development, we need help on bug fixes, we need help on code reviews, and we need help on writing more documentation. So please, please, please get involved in that. One of the biggest things that we really just need is we need more code reviews, we need more documentation. Things are just kind of they were in my head for a really long time, but now we're putting out in the wild. People are using it and seeing the insights of how things are working. And getting both of those things working will really speed up the development for Source Cooperative. And lastly, if you want to contribute a data product, just reach out to hello@source.coop. They can get you sorted out on hosting any data products. And that's all I have. If I think we have just a little bit of time for questions, if anyone has any. Raphael?
Oh, great. Okay. How's it going? Thanks
Okay,
for the
cool.
talk. Just kind of wondering, like, what kind of limitations on data you guys have, and how this compares to something like Zenodo or like one of these archival services.
There's really no limits. It is stored on object store, so we support basically an unlimited amount of file size, basically. I think the only limit to that is what Radiant Earth and Source Cooperative are willing to host on there.
Sure.
So, obviously, if you're going to host a petabyte of data, probably reach out before that. But currently, there's no technical limitations to that.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. We're subsidized by Azure and AWS. Our discussions with Azure in terms of like how much more we can host are ongoing, but with AWS we have thanks to the AWS Open Data Program, we have quite a bit of capacity left, and on the order of well, less than a petabyte. I'll say that. I don't want to say exactly how much, so somebody won't ask me to use all of it, but we can host quite a bit of data. So just reach out. And I think well, anyway, I'm a big fan of Carbon Plan, so would love to work with you all if you got data you
Great.
want to host.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I was just thinking, like, kind of with these talk about references, like these are so tiny to share and be great to just toss out there for other people to use.
Cool. Is that someone?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh wait, there's in the Q&A. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to read it?
So yeah, Yusuf asked if there are any plans for versioning support. Um, I don't have
Yeah,
any plans for this, but Kevin, do you have thoughts on this?
I do have a few thoughts on this. So this is very similar to kind of what iChunk is doing on there.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, they've built something very similar to where they're kind of like abstracting the actual like files or that are files that are stored on object store, and they have their own kind of metadata there to handle that versioning. That's something that is like technically possible. That requires a lot of feature development on that. Now that we have built out this Rust proxy, which one thing I forgot to mention, it is written in Rust now. We did a bunch of performance benchmarking. We first did an iteration in Python. We found out that it's not really performing as well. Tried some other different versions, and then we landed on Rust as being the most performant. There's really not that much of a noticeable performance differences between like actually accessing S3 directly. But yeah, now that we have this Rust proxy developed, we are in a position that we could start developing that feature, but it's not currently in the roadmap, and it honestly takes a lot more effort than I can currently contribute.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, we no longer employ Kevin. And but I would also say that I think the frame the framing we're using for Source right now, it's mostly built for finished data products that are meant to be published as like an artifact of research. Things that would have a DOI on them and that for the most part are expected to not change. Although I do know that you can version DOIs as well. So I'm not going to say, I won't never say never, but it's not on the immediate roadmap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I see there's another question about if there's any requirements on metadata or file formats. There is not, although there is just kind of like nudges where we do want you to, obviously use cloud native geospatial data formats where possible, include as much metadata as possible, but there's no hard requirements on you need to include those to host data.
All right.
Cool. All right, well, off to Jed's session.